CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. Far too long, we have lived with the discomfort of being a second-class citizen. And frankly, I'm tired of it, and every single Muslim in this country should be tired of it.
Whereas on January 27, 2024, Representative Omar gave remarks at an event in Minneapolis in which she made treasonous statements. Whereas Representative Omar said she has spoken to many Somalians who asked her to intercede for the Somali government by pressuring the United States government into certain actions.
So here we sit. I could associate myself and do with all the remarks the gentleman from South Carolina. I have very strong disagreement with a lot of the statements that Representative Omar has made. We've covered most of them. That some people did something is the one that really sticks in my craw pretty strongly. Raises a whole lot of flags for me. I think there are significant amount of justifications to raise issues with respect to service on the Foreign Affairs Committee. But
the chamber was already tense. But when Ilhan Omar's remarks resurfaced, the air shifted from politics to principle. Lawmakers weren't just debating words, they were questioning loyalty. Her comments about Somali interests and that infamous "some people did something" line reignited an old wound in the American conscience. It wasn't just tone deaf. It was a reminder of how far our discourse has drifted from accountability. What you're seeing here isn't a partisan spat. It's a deeper clash between those who treat patriotism as optional and those who still believe it's sacred. When a member of Congress downplays 9/11, one of the most painful chapters in our nation's history, Americans have every right to demand clarity. Words matter because they reveal values, and in this case, the values on display were alarming. Omar's defenders claim she was misunderstood. But you and I know that when someone's pattern of speech consistently diminishes American identity while elevating foreign interests, it's not a misunderstanding. It's a mindset. This is why representatives like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Chip Roy are pushing back hard. They're not defending party lines. They're defending the principle that loyalty to the Constitution isn't negotiable. Because when a leader can casually reference 9/11 without reverence, when allegiance becomes blurred by global agendas, and when accountability is treated as persecution, that's when truth needs a louder voice. This debate isn't just about Ilhan Omar. It's about whether we still expect our leaders to stand for America first.
Whereas on January 27, 2024, Representative Omar gave remarks at an event in Minneapolis in which she made treasonous statements. Whereas Representative Omar said she has spoken to many Somalians who asked her to intercede for the Somali government by pressuring the United States government into certain actions. Whereas Representative Omar assured the Somalians she spoke to, the U.S. government will only do what Somalians in the U.S. tell them to do. They will do what we want and nothing else. They must follow our orders, and that is how we will safeguard the interest of Somalia. Whereas Representative Omar continued.
When Marjorie Taylor Greene and Chip Roy took the floor, the tone in Congress changed from heated debate to historic reckoning. This wasn't grandstanding. It was a line drawn in the sand. Greene and Roy didn't just question Omar's rhetoric. They exposed what it represents. A dangerous departure from the values that bind this nation together. Their message was unmistakable. If your allegiance wavers, you don't belong in the halls of American power. As Greene's words filled the chamber, the tension broke into silence. The kind of silence that only comes when truth collides with comfort. She invoked George Washington's warning about pretended patriotism, a phrase as relevant today as it was 2 centuries ago. Because what we're witnessing isn't disagreement over policy, It's a test of principle. When elected officials swear an oath to this country, that oath is sacred. It's not something you tailor to fit your personal loyalties or cultural sympathies. Chip Roy reinforced that message, cutting through political theater to make it clear you cannot serve two masters. America's founders understood that divided loyalty isn't diversity, it's danger. Greene's formal resolution to censure Ilhan Omar wasn't an act of vengeance, it was a defense of the republic itself. A reminder that freedom and loyalty go hand in hand, and that when one falters, both are at risk. This wasn't about punishing a politician. It was about preserving the moral backbone of the nation. Because when those sworn to protect America begin excusing those who undermine it, silence becomes complicity. And in that chamber, silence finally broke.
For as long as I am in U.S. Congress, Somalia will never be in danger. Its waters will not be stolen by Ethiopia or others. Sleep in comfort knowing I am here to protect the interest of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. Whereas George Washington warned in his farewell address of 1796 to guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism, and further declared citizens by birth or choice of a common country, that country has a right to concentrate your affections. The name of American.
What made this moment so explosive wasn't just the accusation. It was the principle behind it. When Marjorie Taylor Greene cited Omar's remarks in Minneapolis claiming the U.S. government would act according to Somali interests, it hit a nerve that runs deeper than party lines. Because the question isn't about identity, it's about allegiance. Greene's argument was simple but profound. When an elected official speaks as if America's power exists to serve another nation, that's not representation, that's dereliction. Chip Roy followed with that same fire, reminding Congress and the country that history is full of moments where loyalty was tested and clarity mattered. From Senate showdowns to judicial wars, he painted a clear picture of what happens when principle gives way to political convenience. Roy wasn't just defending procedure, he was defending order, the constitutional guardrails that prevent our republic from becoming a playground for divided interests. And that's the point most people miss. This isn't about silencing Ilhan Omar. It's about drawing a line between free speech and foreign allegiance. Because when a U.S. representative tells a domestic crowd that America's government will move at the will of another nation's citizens, that's not diplomacy. It's danger wrapped in rhetoric. Greene's resolution and Roy's speech weren't just reactions. They were warnings. Every generation faces a moment where it must decide whether patriotism still means something. This was one of those moments. And by standing up, Greene and Roy weren't just confronting a member of Congress. They were defending the meaning of the oath itself. America First isn't a slogan. It's the foundation of sovereignty. And when that foundation cracks, the republic trembles.
Belongs to you in your national capacity must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. Whereas these statements by Representative Omar clearly violate the oath she took as an elected member of Congress to defend and protect the United States Constitution. Whereas Representative Omar has exhibited the treasonous tendencies George Washington warned about, and her actions must be condemned by all members of Congress who adhere to the oath they took upon assuming office.
By the time Greene and Roy finished, it was no longer just a debate. It was a declaration. The criticism leveled at Ilhan Omar wasn't about partisanship, it was about a pattern. A pattern of voting against border protection, downplaying crime, and pushing globalist policies that chip away at the very idea of national sovereignty. Greene didn't mince words. She said what millions of Americans have felt for years, that Omar's priorities sound more like the United Nations than the United States. And that message cut through the noise. Because here's the truth. When lawmakers put ideology above country, they don't just fail in duty, they fracture trust. Greene and Roy turned that frustration into focus. Their words gave voice to every American who's tired of seeing their nation's values traded for applause in elite circles. It wasn't anger, it was conviction. A reminder that loyalty to the Constitution isn't negotiable and patriotism isn't a punchline. Their stand on the House floor did something rare in modern politics. It united people across party lines who are fed up with weakness disguised as virtue. Even some Democrats quietly nodded as they heard words that resonated with principle instead of politics. Greene and Roy made the stakes unmistakable. You either stand with America or you stand in the way of it. This moment wasn't just about Ilhan Omar. It was about drawing a line for the future, a line between excuses and accountability, between blurred borders and national identity, between moral courage and political theater. And for millions watching, it marked a turning point. A reminder that despite all the noise, there are still leaders willing to fight for America first.
And whereas by openly admitting her efforts to advance Somalia's interest, using her position as a United States representative, Representative Omar has revealed herself to be a foreign agent acting on behalf of a foreign government. Now therefore be it. Resolve that Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota be censured. Representative Ilhan Omar forthwith present herself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure. Representative Ilhan Omar be censured with the public reading of this resolution by the Speaker, and Representative Ilhan Omar be and is hereby removed from the Committee of the Budget and the Committee on Education and the Workforce.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Appreciate the chairman.
Outside the marble halls of Congress, the ripple effect was immediate. Ilhan Omar's once secure seat is now under fire, not from partisan rivals, but from disillusioned voters in her own backyard. The people who once saw her as a symbol of change are starting to ask a different question. Change into what? Reports show growing unrest in her district, where constituents are beginning to wonder if she still represents their values or if she's become more loyal to ideology than to the people who sent her to Washington. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Chip Roy's confrontation didn't just rattle the chamber, it reignited a movement. Their message wasn't subtle, and it wasn't meant to be. It said, the days of divided loyalty are over. They transformed a congressional hearing into a national reckoning, a call for every American to demand integrity and accountability from those sworn to defend the Republic. And in doing so, they didn't just challenge Omar, they challenged an entire political culture that has allowed double standards to thrive for too long. This wasn't just about one representative or one controversy. It was about drawing a hard line in defense of American sovereignty and moral clarity. Greene and Roy reminded the country that leadership is a responsibility, not a reward. And that when you take an oath to the Constitution, that oath isn't conditional, it's binding. Whether Omar weathers this storm or not, the message has already been delivered. The era of unchecked hypocrisy in Washington is ending. Conservatives see this moment as a spark, a turning point that marks the return of courage in Congress. Because when you strip away the noise, the slogans, and the politics, one truth remains: loyalty to America must always come first.
I do associate myself with the remarks of the gentleman from Kentucky, but also the gentleman from South Carolina, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the gentlelady, all the remarks that we've been talking about over here. And I appreciate the spirit of the remarks from the gentleman from Colorado. Would note that we're here for a very obvious reason. The door was opened, and now we're dealing with that. And the door shouldn't have been opened. I'm reminded when I was in the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2005, and Miguel Estrada was being filibustered by the Democrat majority at the time. And we know why. We know this because a memo that said very specifically that he was being filibustered because he was an Hispanic conservative was found, but then shoved aside. We couldn't talk about it because it was found on a server, and they said, we shouldn't get it. There's a whole lot of backstory on that. But there was a lot of drama around that. There were 7 judges being held up: Priscilla Owen, Janice Rogers Brown, because she's black. That was all happening. We just sweep that aside. And you fast forward, and Bill Frist was being pressured to deploy the nuclear option.
As the debate intensified, one truth cut through the noise. This wasn't just a political dispute. It was a test of national principle. Supporters of the censure stood firm, arguing that what's at stake isn't party loyalty, but loyalty to America itself. They pointed to Omar's own remarks as evidence that her priorities were dangerously misplaced, painting a picture of a lawmaker who speaks for foreign interests while serving in the U.S. Congress. That accusation divided loyalty, struck at the heart of the oath every representative swears to uphold. Marjorie Taylor Greene seized that moment with precision. Her speech wasn't just fire. It was a line in the sand. She declared that the oath of office cannot be treated as a political accessory. It's a promise to the Constitution, to the people, and to the security of the nation. Greene warned that if lawmakers can pledge allegiance to America with one hand and advocate for another country with the other, then the foundation of Congress itself begins to crumble. Her words echoed far beyond the chamber, because for many Americans, that fear feels real. Chip Roy followed with conviction, grounding Greene's emotional charge in history. He reminded Congress that this isn't the first time the Republic has faced questions of loyalty and resolve. From past foreign influence scandals to moments when leaders were forced to choose between popularity and principle, Roy's message was simple. Every generation must defend the meaning of allegiance anew. And today, that defense begins here. For voters watching across the country, this debate wasn't about Ilhan Omar anymore. It was about whether America still has the courage to enforce its own standards, whether patriotism is still a duty or just a talking point. Greene and Roy made sure that question would hang in the air long after the gavel fell.
I remember being part of all those conversations, the Senate lawyer and the Judiciary Committee. Bill Frist decided not to deploy the nuclear option. In 2013, Harry Reid did deploy the nuclear option. 2017, then certain things changed at the United States Supreme Court. So now we live in that world. It is what it is. Now here we sit. The door was open. I just went back and reread my speech on the floor because the gentleman, I hadn't done that yet. I went back and reread my speech on the floor. I stand by every word of that speech. And in it, I referenced the fact that I had just a few months prior had been in agreement with some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle with respect to January 6th, which there's disagreements on our side of the aisle on some of that with respect to the votes at the time, and that I'd taken very strong disagreement and sought apology from our colleague on our side of the aisle about some of the remarks that were said, but felt that this was not the right path to go down. I stand by that. So here we sit. I could associate myself and do with all the remarks of the gentleman from South Carolina. I have very strong disagreement with a lot of the statements that Representative Omar has made. We've covered most of them. that some people did something is the one that really sticks in my craw pretty strongly. Raises a whole lot of flags for me. I think there are significant amount of justification.
By the time Greene and Roy finished, it was no longer just a debate. It was a declaration. The criticism leveled at Ilhan Omar wasn't about partisanship. It was about a pattern. A pattern of voting against border protection, downplaying crime, and pushing globalist policies that chip away at the very idea of national sovereignty. Greene didn't mince words. She said what millions of Americans have felt for years, that Omar's priorities sound more like the United Nations than the United States. And that message cut through the noise. Because here's the truth. When lawmakers put ideology above country, they don't just fail in duty, they fracture trust. Greene and Roy turned that frustration into focus. Their words gave voice to every American who's tired of seeing their nation's values traded for applause in elite circles. It wasn't anger, it was conviction. A reminder that loyalty to the Constitution isn't negotiable and patriotism isn't a punchline. Their stand on the House floor did something rare in modern politics. It united people across party lines who are fed up with weakness disguised as virtue. Even some Democrats quietly nodded as they heard words that resonated with principle instead of politics. Greene and Roy made the stakes unmistakable. You either stand with America or you stand in the way of it. This moment wasn't just about Ilhan Omar. It was about drawing a line for the future. A line between excuses and accountability, between blurred borders and national identity, between moral courage and political theater. And for millions watching, it marked a turning point. A reminder that despite all the noise, there are still leaders willing to fight for America first. Grassroots movements picked up momentum overnight, framing the censure not as punishment, but as protection. Protection of America's sovereignty, its institutions, and its moral spine. Even some on the left couldn't fully defend Omar's words. The unease was visible. Deflection replaced defense. And that silence spoke volumes. For many Americans, this moment symbolized a long overdue reckoning. The end of blind tolerance for divided loyalty within the nation's own leadership. As the dust settled, one truth became undeniable. Greene and Roy had redrawn the line between politics and patriotism. The standard was set. America first. Always. For conservatives, it was a defining victory. For Ilhan Omar, it was the defining challenge of her career. And for the country, it marked the start of a new era. One where allegiance to the Constitution is no longer assumed but demanded.